Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Lindsay Wilson. We're here with your virtual version of Municipal Campaign School. And today we have Municipal Councilor in Ward 2 for Zorra in Oxford County, Katie Grigg. So thank you for joining us, Katie. And before we get started, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement and then we will get right into it. So while we are meeting virtually in Oxford County, we have Municipal Campaign School partners and students all over Southwestern Ontario. So as all of you begin your journey into politics, we invite you to consider how all levels of government and their elected leaders can tackle the 94 calls to action found in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We do this to confirm our commitment and our understanding of local Indigenous peoples and cultures. We acknowledge that there were people, cultures, and traditions on these lands long before we were. We acknowledge the traditional territories of Neutral, Attawandaron, Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, Lenape, Algonquin, Lenni Lenape, the Ojibwe, and the Chippewa peoples. So without further ado, thank you, Katie, and Kate, of course, joining us for this conversation today. Kate, do you want to get started? Their first question for Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me just go to my questions here. All right, Katie, so why don't we start off by tell us a little bit about yourself. You're from Zorra, how long you've lived there, you are a first-term municipal councilor, those kind of things. Why don't you give us a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up in London, Ontario, and went to school in Toronto, came back to London, and it wasn't until my first daughter, who's now 15, when she was 1, we were looking for our first home. And so we looked in London, where I was quite familiar with, and we weren't really finding anything that we liked. And we thought, you know, what about raising our family in a small town? So that's where we found Tempsford. And the very first house we looked at, we bought and started putting down roots here in Tempsford. So I wasn't born in Zorra, and I had no connections, didn't know a single person who lived here. And this is where we found a place to call home and start, involving ourselves in the community and participating. So my background, my educational background is in fine arts. I have a fine arts degree from OCADU in Toronto, and I got to spend a year of my education in their off-site campus in Florence. So I was very fortunate to do a little bit of travel with my studies, and had some great experiences and got to see sort of different ways of living in different parts of the world. But definitely being back in the London area, I have found that Zorra has been a really wonderful place to raise a family. When we first moved here, I thought, you know, when they're little, this would be a great place. But once they get older, what's there to do in a small town? Maybe we'll move back to the city. And the longer we're here, the more we fall in love with it and realize that there's tons to do here and lots of ways for us to contribute and give back. So that's a little bit about me and where I've come from. I guess also when my children were quite young, my older 2, when they were quite young, I was at home full time with them for about 8 years. I coached their sports teams, co-chaired the school council, started getting involved those types of ways. And then I was, up until recently, I was a small business owner, doing art instruction, like a social painting type class. And due to some COVID restrictions, it was difficult to sort of carry forward with it. So I ended up closing my business. But when that happened, I was already involved in municipal politics. So it's a little bit about my background. I'm sure there's more there, but yeah.
My husband's saying goodbye. So Katie, can you walk us through the process of deciding to run in 2018? What made you want to run? How did you make that decision?
So the seed started being planted, I think, just ahead of the previous municipal election. My daughter's school was up for review for closure, and they needed some parent representatives on the ARC committee. And so I got involved on that committee, and the municipal councilor at that time for Ward 2 was also on the committee, and her name is Marie Kesey. So I had an opportunity to work with her about something that we were both really passionate about within our community. And I recognize in her, we both had all the same concerns, but she had some strong leadership. She wasn't afraid to use her voice. She was far more effective in her role on that committee than what I was. And I remember I had a conversation with her. I got really kind of upset in the process and was feeling defeated. And she took me aside and talked to me a bit. And I told her at the end of that conversation, when I grow up, I'm going to be you. And total deadpan, she said back to me, you can be me right now. And that really, I can still feel that had that much impact on me, that I thought, man, I have so much respect for you. And you're looking back at me saying, we're no different. You can totally be where I am now. If your passion is there for it, you'll get there. So as we started getting closer to the 2018 election, it became known that she was not going to be running again. And slowly people started asking me. And I had several different people ask me over the course of a couple of years. And I came to a point in my personal life where I was interested in setting some new goals and having something to work towards, having some direction. And I was considering possibly running for council, although it still seemed like something like, I couldn't possibly do this now. I'm not ready. I don't know enough. And one of the other things we were considering was growing our family. I'd been separated, had a new partner. We were looking at whether or not we wanted to have more children added to our family. So sort of going through what all the options were. In the end, I did end up getting pregnant. And so for me, that set the next few years course of what I was going to be doing and where my energy was going to be going. And I was really happy with that. And as I started to relay that information back to the people who kept nudging me, I was shocked by their response. They were like, congratulations, that's fantastic. Are you going to run? Like, what do you mean, am I going to run? I was due right after the election. I was going to have a newborn baby at the beginning of the next term of council. So there was no way in my mind that those two things could, operate together. So, my first thought was absolutely not, 99% no. And over time, the more I was asked, I had some experience with Zorra Township staff, and I was quite comfortable with the office. I'd sat on a couple committees. I had worked with township staff in my roles as a community volunteer. And those discussions only made me consider this more. So, we're so accommodating. We can do this, we can do that. They were just incredibly open-minded and encouraging. And one of my strongest encouragers was the current sitting councilor at that time, Marie Kesey. So I talked it through with my family, talked to my kids, because obviously it was going to have some impact on them, and ended up announcing my interest to run through Facebook to my community, to my friends and family, and had to get those signatures, right? And I thought, well, okay, if I can get those signatures, if I have that support, then maybe this is a good option to put my name out there. And it was overwhelming. The support was overwhelming. And so that was it. My nomination was filed. And then on the last day that you could file your nomination, no one else had filed. So I was acclaimed. And then I, carried forward my, just preparing for council. I ended up having, going overdue and having a C-section 2 weeks before our first council meeting. So I started my term of council with a newborn baby in a car seat that I could not carry, could not drive a vehicle, breastfed exclusively for the first, until he started eating food, he would not take a bottle. So I had staff members helping me get to council, friends of mine that work for the township. And he sat in a little bouncy seat beside my spot at the desk. I nursed him during meetings, and we carried on business as usual, and it was never a problem. So I'm very grateful because I recognize that not every municipality is Zorra. And I've had incredibly positive experiences in Zorra, but I think because it happened in Zorra, it's good proof that it can and should happen anywhere. So anyways, that's sort of what led up to me deciding. There was a lot of self-doubt along the way, and it really took being nudged multiple times. I think they say for a man, you just have to ask him once and he'll run. For a woman, it's 7 times. Mine was probably a good dozen or so before I actually seriously considered it. And that support was huge in nudging me forward, as I told myself I wasn't good enough yet. I didn't know about the details of the Drainage Act or, any of those little things that you think, well, you must know these things because it's part of your job. So learning that you can be still a student in this role, and you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything and be perfect for it, for you to be able to contribute and have meaningful, positive impact for your community.
Well, I just want to stop you right there and applaud you wholeheartedly, because I'm sure I speak for Lindsay and myself when I say that, a lot of women with families, that's a big, it's a big fear of, your family time, or I have young children, or that lingering question of how will you juggle it all? So not only, I applaud you for already having a family, but to quite literally be giving birth and then go to your first meeting and walking through, breastfeeding in public and in the chambers. I mean, that's just so inspirational. And to all the viewers that are watching, I hope that really speaks to a lot of women with families or any type of responsibilities. I think we're so quick to put ourselves last and our dreams and aspirations. And the reality is that you can have it all. Takes a bit of support, but good for you. And I'm so thankful that you've shared that with us. That's just incredible.
Thank you.
So with that, I should lead into, would you like to walk us through, describe the job as a municipal councilor? What does a typical day look like? Kind of circling back to, I really appreciated that you said, you can be a student, within the role. There's an idea that campaigning and the job itself are 2 different things. So I didn't know if you could speak to the fact that, if we have students that are elected this fall, you don't have to have a lifelong list of credentials. You can go into it with, dedication and interest for the job, and lots of learning can happen while you're in the role, correct?
Absolutely. I think, the things that I thought would be assets in terms of a skill set for this job was the details of what which is silly. It should be that you have passion for your community, that you're willing to work hard, that you're a creative problem solver. And all of those things, they don't come to you because you know everything about the Drainage Act, right? It's interesting because when I think about the skills that I have that have helped me be the most successful in this role, I can directly link those to my lived experiences of being a parent, a partner, working hard at a relationship, learning to run a business. It's not necessarily just, I went to school for political sciences and here I am. I have a great understanding. I've always been interested in our election topics. I've always, followed, but I've never known everything. I've never been, obsessively connected with politics. I even would often say I have no interest in politics, because the word politics sort of had all of these sort of dirty connotations that I never wanted to be affiliated with. So getting into this, the things that have been helpful skills have come from all sorts of different experiences I have had in my life, which I think is a strong point for everyone to take. Is, when we look at other people and say, oh, wow, that's so great what you're doing, I could never do that. And I have myself in my own head, I have thought that about both of you. Wow, that's so great what you're doing, I could never do that. And I pause myself when I do that, when I say that. And I think we should all pause ourselves and say, wait a second, if I see value in what you're doing, right? That's the real thing, is that we see shared value. If I see value in what you're doing, well, you've worked up to it. You've built space and time for it, and this is what you've achieved. If I see the value in it, guaranteed I would at some point, build the time and space to achieve the same things. I think sometimes we look at someone else's, as women, we look at someone else's accomplishment and go, wow, I couldn't do that. Instead of saying, wow, that's really great that you did that. And similarly, look what I'm doing, So in terms of what the job of a municipal councilor looks like, there's so much variety. And I think that is part of what I really love about it. There's parts that are incredibly satisfying. There are parts that are incredibly frustrating. There's days where there's a lot to do, and there's days where you do nothing. So, your role as a representative of your constituency, you have a policy role, you have a stewardship role, and then you have all these different tasks. There's only so many things about this role that are laid out, with sort of rules, like the Municipal Act, your municipality's procedural bylaw. There's rules about what you can or cannot do, or how many meetings you have to attend. And if you miss so many, then, and then there's a process. Like, the rules are very minimal. What you, how you do this job is really up to you. And then it's up to voters to decide if that's enough, right? So I have 1 to 2 council meetings a month, depending on the month of the year. A few months we only have 1 per month, but usually we have the first and third Wednesday of the month. We have usually it's a morning and then an evening. An agenda could be 100 pages or 800. So when you get your agenda, you're preparing for your meeting, you're showing up for your meeting and participating. Each councilor also sits on a committee or 2. So then you have whatever that meeting schedule is to participate in those meetings and be prepared with those agendas. There's events that come up. There haven't been so many in the last couple of years because of COVID, but there's events that you show up as sort of like just cutting ribbons, shaking hands, that kind of thing. It's actually a really fun part of the job because it gives you a chance to get out and really meet a lot of people, and maybe meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. And then there's the interactions with residents. So someone's really angry about a thing and they call you or email you, and you're sort of that point of contact for them to help navigate if there's something that can help solve it or not. Those tasks themselves make up what you kind of have to work through as a counselor. So when I first started, I had my work email on my work computer, but I also had it on my cell phone. And when I got a new cell phone, maybe 6 months into my term, I said, no work email on this. Because when I'm at the grocery store, I don't want ding, oh, Jim's not happy about a pothole, because I wasn't able to best respond when my attention was divided. So this started to kind of cut into my personal time and getting those things done and taking care of my family. So for myself, I've set some boundaries where I make sure that I look at my work computer at least once or twice a day. If there's nothing really on it, not a big deal. I give myself 48 hours to respond to somebody. And so if a day goes by that, something gets really busy and I don't end up checking my work email, I tell them that's not the end of the world. I'll get to it tomorrow. Ultimately, if my 48 hours is not enough for Tempsford and someone else says, I'll respond to your email within 30 seconds, and then next election, that's what they choose, that's democracy, and I'm okay with that. So those pieces become the ebbs and flows of whether you have a 2-hour day or you want to put in a 10-hour day or 2 minutes. The other side of how you spend your time is sort of looking at some of these ongoing problems or concerns that you see and you want to have some real change in. So you can just show up to the meeting and go through whatever is put on the agenda by staff, right? Or you can put things on that agenda. And sometimes putting something on that agenda is pretty simple. Sometimes it takes a lot of work to sort of start building a case and figuring out how can I, what's the best way to get this change through. And so you can really spend as much or as little time and energy on this as you feel appropriate, or whatever you have to give. And then ultimately it's up to the voters if that has been enough or not. I'm kind of in a unique situation because I was acclaimed. I promised nothing other than, I'm here and I'm going to do my best for you. And so there hasn't been, I think, when you're campaigning against somebody, you have other candidates. I think there's a little bit more pressure to lay out some clear, these are the things that I'm really going to try to achieve. I didn't have to do it that way. So I've kind of been lucky that I've been able to identify the things that matter to me in my community as I've learned about them as I've gone.
And to your point about the motions, which we'd love to, I'm sure Lindsay will ask some questions about your recent motion that you brought to your council. Just a quick curiosity question. Typically, if you brought that forward, an idea or a plan or an objective of a goal that you have, can you walk us through what that looks like? I mean, do you essentially go to your clerk? Do you speak to your colleagues for support? It was just, again, we'll get into your specific recent news, which is really exciting. But yeah, I just wanted to know kind of the ins and outs of like, is it a simple thing that you can do, or I guess, yeah, it could be a lengthy process.
So it's incredibly simple. And I would recommend to anyone who's considering running for municipal council, your clerk is such a valuable resource. We have a phenomenal clerk system in Zorra, and I have spent many hours in the clerk's office saying, this is what I'm thinking of doing. At the beginning of my term, when I was brand new, I would say, this is something I'm really upset about. I think that this is the direction I want to go with some change. I want to bring a notice of motion. I don't know how to write notices of motion. I don't really know if this is asking, if I'm hitting this. And she really helped me, really walked me through how to structure my motions so that I made sure that they were clear in what I was asking for, because it is the document that staff takes away and works with. So everything, all of your intentions, it's what's on that piece of paper, right? So having strong motion writing skills definitely helps you most effectively achieve what you're intending to achieve, and that you don't end up with some sort of, not as fulfilling a resolution because, and by resolution, I don't mean motion resolution, I mean like resolve, because you weren't as clear as you could have been. So each municipality's procedural bylaw will speak to the specifics of the process, but for us, our agendas are posted on the Thursday before our Wednesday council meeting, and we have to have anything for the agenda submitted by the Wednesday, the day before it's posted. So all I have to do is submit, here's my notice of motion, and submit it to the clerk.
Okay.
As long as I meet that deadline of 4 p.m. on Wednesday, on the agenda it goes. When we get to the meeting, so I will put the motion on the table. So I will be the first to sign it. And every vote that happens at council has to have someone first, someone second, then it's put on the table, then it's debated, then you vote on it. So if you don't have 2 council members who are in support of even hearing it, then you can't hear it. So that then you get into the strategy that gets into the politics side, right? So if I have something I want to do and I think it might be a contentious issue, or I may or may not have support, showing up and just blindsiding my council with it and then saying who's going to second this on the day of the meeting, I may or may not get that. Mm-hmm. And if no one's willing to second it, we cannot even discuss it. Mm-hmm. So in my preparation for my motion, I always speak to at least one other councilor ahead of time. And I usually lead with, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is how I have it drafted. I'm looking for a seconder. Would you be willing? Do you have any questions or concerns? And then that sort of lets you iron out some of those concerns ahead of time. You still debate it in the meeting, but it gives your counselors an opportunity to sort of figure things out and not feel like they're as put on the spot. We're allowed to have those one-on-one conversations. I can't say to 2 other counselors, hey, both of you, this is what I want to do at council. You're not allowed to ever talk about any council business when you have a majority of council. So for Zorra, because we only have 5, 2 people can talk. As soon as 3 people talk, that's considered advancing business outside of a public meeting. So it's illegal. Mm-hmm. So those one-on-one conversations I find really helpful. I also like to talk to the staff members that are related to whatever the topic is that I'm interested in. So if I'm wanting to do something, I had a notice of motion a few meetings ago about how we maintain our sidewalks. The uneven transitions in the sidewalks, they have to be inspected and repaired once a year. And Zorra, we currently do it in the fall so that they're repaired right before the winter, so that they're nice and smooth for the sidewalk plow. It's safe for the sidewalk plow. In the spring, with the thaw, sometimes there's some heaving. And then all summer, there's a problematic sidewalk for everybody who's using a sidewalk, right? And then by the time we get to fall and we've tripped over them all year, then we fix them for the winter. And then in the spring, we have problems again. So with that one, so what I asked for wasn't for a change to that. I asked for, we're basically collecting information relating to that topic to see if there's good reason to change our practices and how that would impact budget. But in working through that, I had my own experiences about what that meant for my community members. I had a neighbor in a motorized wheelchair stuck on an uneven sidewalk transition. She could, her motorized wheelchair couldn't get over it. She was stuck. So I know that it matters for my area. But I also know that staff have their practices for a reason. So I spent the extra time looking into why is it the current way that it is, gauging staff on, what do you think about, these are my ideas, and getting some of that information so that by the time I brought my notice of motion to council, I was prepared in a way that hopefully I was going to be able to advance my concern. And other counselors are going to ask questions relating to what I'm trying to do of the areas of staff that are most knowledgeable about it. So if they're going to be asking those questions to the Director of Public Works, it really helps for me to know what kind of information they're going to be getting back, right? So it can be as simple as writing a notice of motion, submitting it on the Wednesday before the council meeting, showing up to council and seeing what happens. Or it can be something where you are setting up meetings, doing research, building a case, talking to your colleagues, and then showing up and having probably a better chance of success with what you're trying to do. I really think about, like, I enjoyed school projects when I was in like high school.
Yeah.
I loved doing a project, and this to me is totally like,
Well, that's the funny part is that, again, municipally, you're running independently opposed to a party or other levels. And as much as we put that pressure on ourselves of being the candidate, you know, I got to know everything, you know, what if I don't know everything, my experience. But I mean, the proof's in the pudding of what you've said, that it is a lot of teamwork, or it's certainly a lot of working together with staff, your colleagues, community members. I mean, I think being able to be, I don't know if brave's the right word, but I think being comfortable asking questions and seeking knowledge, it sounds like that's a lot to do with fulfilling that role, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to, you have to be comfortable enough with yourself to say it's okay that I don't know everything, and it's okay if other people know that I don't know everything, because as soon as you get over that hump, it's like, well, then I have questions. And I almost think like that's one of probably the strongest, the most beneficial aspect of me being so green to this. Like, I went to every council meeting. When I filed my nomination, prior to me filing my nomination, I started attending the council meetings, because I'm like, what does this actually look? What does the meetings actually look like? How does this work? I knew nothing. Like, who's seconding and first, like what, how does a Robert's rule, like what is this?
Yeah.
And so I started going to these meetings just to try to I'd bring my own computer and I'd have the agenda up and I'd be following along, like, what would I think about this? How would I contribute? How does this work? And so once that nomination was filed, I attended every meeting. But other than that, I was totally green, right? So going into it and saying, I know nothing, I haven't worked in the municipal sector, I know nothing about this, that, and the other. So guess what? I have a lot of questions. You know, when you think you know enough, you don't ask those questions. You assume you already know. When you know very little, and what you bring is the skill set of how you analyze it, how you know, what your problem solving skills are, that's what you bring to it. But the information is like, I know nothing about planning. We got a planning application. Who wants to do what, where? Okay, so why? So how does this, you know, staff really were very patient with me. And actually, a lot of them were actually quite excited with the level of questions. Like, I want to know, but why is this way? And how is it that we have this? So how does that pertain to this application? And then what if they want to do this later? And how does the severance work? And so I have actually, you know, have found some things in my role that other people sort of just breezed over and didn't notice. I'm like, wait a second, like, oh yeah, no, we didn't realize that how that lined up wasn't quite right. But I found it because I knew nothing. So I asked everything. So I think even just that shift in someone knows more than me isn't always an asset. Me knowing nothing and being comfortable saying I know nothing, so I'm going to ask everything. I've unearthed things that other people have missed. You know, so it's that shift in perspective and just sort of getting comfortable enough with yourself as being, you know, I am a student. I'm a student of my community. I don't know I'm connected with my community. I don't know my community inside out today, so I'm done. You know, my community is always changing and growing. I have to continue to be a student of my community, to be a student of the municipal process. And I think, you know, those are such, it's such an asset in this role.
Mhm.
I don't remember what your question was.
Oh, that's okay. It's great. Well, I was just thinking of campaigning and to your point, Katie, where, other students, whether it's Guelph, Center Wellington, or other areas, they have wards and you have sometimes 5 or 6 or 7 people running for one seat, right? Or I'm in Woodstock and Lindsay's in Ingersoll. And it's interesting when sometimes with politicians, when they are campaigning, they are making large promises, right? And sometimes I wish we could humble ourselves to say, one of the reasons I'm running, you're running is because I'm so eager to learn. You're so eager to be that student and to be that connecting piece within your community to say, a lot of people are intimidated with politics. They don't know how it works, but we need to connect the community with elected officials to educate everybody to have a better understanding and to have better results. So far, my takeaway piece of this is just to relate to people that we must get comfortable with. You don't need to know everything. And if you are eager to learn, there's a great opportunity here,
Absolutely.
I think too, the value that women bring to the table, if I can be bold enough to say that, is like politics often becomes about, like you said, these promises, what you're going to do. And those are important. People want to hear that. But I think there's also a conversation on how you will do it, because I think that's the difference that, like you've talked about today, Katie, like being humble and asking questions is vastly different than how most leaders have led in our community. And I think opening up those conversations to women and to people who want to leave, to not just say, what will you do, but how will you do it? And how will that be different? Because I think, well, and we can maybe go to the changes you made in your community very recently, but I think how you lead allowed you to achieve what you did, which was, like I'm talking specifically about the washroom facilities in Zorra, that motion, if you want to talk about it. But I think, again, like your lived experience and asking questions, and that's how you uncovered it, and leading differently allowed you to, the how you lead led to a different what. If we only talk about the what all the time, like we end up with the same results and people get frustrated. So I don't know if you wouldn't mind talking about that change, because I think it's what's so fascinating about politics in general, is that it just takes one person with an eye like you had to make a change. So it's good for you. I'm so proud of you for that.
So thank you. And it's interesting. I don't know the sequence I should go with this, because there's a piece that I want to
cut you off for a second, Katie. We'll just need, just for those watching, before you explain, your notice of motion, I think this ties into kind of our question as to why is it so important that women run and be around the table, and even diverse voices, like the wide variety of, as Lindsay said, having that eye, having that experience to bring forward what you were after, and what I think you were successful in. So I just wanted to kind of preface that before you go into it. So
I think there's two things that we can talk about at the same time here. One of them is my lived experience, my eye for this is through the lens of being a woman, is how I've been able to accomplish this. The other thing is that, grossly oversimplifying, but I think there are characteristics of how many women problem solve, communicate, some of those things that I think also are why I've been able to get through some of the changes that are happening. And I don't know that if I hit the ground running with this 3.5 years ago, my first council meeting, if I came out and said, this is what I want to do, because this is baloney, I don't know that it would have happened, right? But over time, gaining a better understanding of how things have come to be, how change happens, how my fellow councilors, how they process information, how they tend to vote, building within them respect for me and the job that I'm doing, like the amount of support that I get from people who say, I actually think the polar opposite of you on a regular basis. But building that mutual respect for differing opinions, I think that has really also helped. So to jump back, because not everyone is following the local news, and I don't know how far people will be watching this, but I brought a notice of motion a couple meetings ago, and it had 2 separate asks on it. One of them was for free menstrual products to be available in all of our township owned facilities in Zorra. The second piece was that we have some dressing rooms in our Tempsford Arena facility that just have a urinal in the corner, no toilet, no partition, and that's it. And so most facilities have a toilet and a stall inside of their dressing rooms, but the arena has 6 dressing rooms, 3 of which were part of an addition, and they do have a toilet and a stall. They also have just a urinal. There's a urinal beside it, but anyways, and 3 of them from the original building never have had a toilet. It was built at a time that women didn't play hockey, at least not in Tempsford, right? And the councilor who sits beside me, that was part of what he spoke to when we talked about that when we debated that motion, was when that arena was built, girls didn't play hockey, and he was a kid, and sort of the evolution of what that facility has been and where women are or are not, within our facilities and how things are changing. So what I asked for was that we get some plans on how we can make these renovations happen to make the dressing rooms achieve gender equity. And what sparked it was, I've been going to this arena for over 10 years. And I've always hated that there's a urinal in the corner and no toilet. But like everybody else, I was like, that sucks. Okay, off we go onto the ice. And I recently was there with my daughter's hockey team. She's based out of Woodstock. She plays for the Woodstock Wildcats. And they went to the Tempsford Arena. I got to shout them out every time.
Of course.
The U13 B team, Coach Justin. And we went to the arena, and the girls were like, we have to go pee. What the heck is this? And it was like, oh, there's just, you have to go through the lobby, which is full of people during a pandemic, but anyways, and you have to go use the public washrooms. And the other team also doesn't have a toilet. So the other team's also using the same public washrooms. Like, we're just, there's 3 stalls, and we're trying to cram all these girls. And it was in that moment that I was like, I know how this all works. And I know how to make change. Like, why have I always accepted this? We've always just accepted this. And so when they came back, I said to them, like, look, what do you guys actually think about this? And one of the girls spoke up, and she said, this is sexist. And and they were all sort of chiming in, and I was like, okay, I'm going to show you how this is done. This is where we're going to go from here, and so I've been able to kind of update them through the process. So that was back in November, and I could have put it on the very next agenda meeting, and I probably would have gotten nowhere fast. But I was like, okay, so I've got some data on retention of girls in youth sport. I've got some information on period poverty. Okay, so now Oxford County is putting free menstrual products into their 2022 budget, which, by the way, they tried to do several years earlier, got nowhere with it. New CAO, some new staff. There's now some new perspectives on DEI work. There's a DEI committee at the county, phenomenal people working hard on that, on lots of different things. And so I looked at this and thought, I have all the tools to build a case. This is my project now. So I started working at it. And I spoke to one of the counselors that I thought would be most opposed to it first, because I thought he may or may not see the value in it. And he's very careful with spending. I call him fiscally conservative. And so I had a conversation with him and said, this has been my experience. This is what I'm thinking about. This is what I'm working on. I'm just putting it out there. And I gave it a bit of time. And he's been incredibly supportive of this initiative. But I think, had I turned around the next meeting in November without all of the research, all of the projected numbers, all of the justification, I also intentionally paired these two together because I thought one of them is going to help convince for the other one, right? If I get this one through, it supports we should do this one too. And I also don't want to show up to every single meeting with, and another thing, because I recognize that that's not going to help me either, right? Which is not going to help the community, which is ultimately what it's about. So I, with the understanding I have of how to get change through, how things work, budgeting process, all of that, that was the motion that I brought forward. And then the very last piece on it was that this be circulated to the area municipalities in Oxford County, and that they be encouraged to consider offering free menstrual products in their facilities. Because I think as the two-tiered structure that we have here in Oxford County, I think is fantastic. I think it's great that we have, the area municipalities, nice and small and connected with their communities. Most of my community knows me because we see each other at the post office, right? Like, to have that close connection with your representation, there's such strength in that. But we have to always maintain connection with what each other is doing. Otherwise, it's inefficient for us all to do the same research in our own silos. So the second I have a great achievement, I think, for Zorra, it's like, okay, so number one, let me help you have the same achievement for where you are. And also nudge, nudge, are you stepping up? Are you going to move forward with this? Oxford County offering free menstrual products, not the first. Lots of larger cities are doing it, and school boards. But because locally they took the lead, I think it helped me in Zorra. Then I'd like to see, the rest of us can all follow suit. And after the meeting, I put a little video on social media, like just a short little, like this happened last night. I was very excited, but I wasn't really sure, like, is the news going to pick this up? What's going to happen or not? And I had a woman that I know who's a parent of a hockey player who plays out of the Tempsford Arena. And she contacted me and she was like, this is amazing. And she's like, here's the thing. We've been saying that this isn't right for years. Mm-hmm. And not once did we think that we could tell somebody and try to get it changed.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
And like, this is silly now, but that is how important little things are. That's how important change is. And that's how important it is to have different voices, backgrounds, perspectives, lived experiences on councils, right? And then the councilor who sits beside me, he said, never in a million years would I have thought of this.
Yeah.
But I'm in full support. Like, oh, wow. Because I wasn't sure if you were going to support this at all. But not only are you supporting it, you're recognizing that the ways that we're different is the reason that we have strength in our council. Mm-hmm. So
that's what I really liked about, I loved all of it and I watched it, and I thought the other fellow councilors said some great comments as well. I grew up playing a lot of hockey, so it's dear to my heart, but I really appreciated what the mayor of Zorra, Marcus Ryan, said, which is that's why you need, as you're saying, different people on council to point this stuff out, right? And Lindsay and I were jumping up and down, just so proud of you. And it's inspiring. And that's the great part about interviewing with you, Katie, and with Nancy Demarest, for Lindsay and I in Oxford to find inspirational elected female leaders has been monumental for us and what we're trying to do, you know. And I'm glad that for this recording, we were able to get a walkthrough of the recent events that took place, and everybody voted to take away and get the information and come back and see what that'll look like. Is that correct? For
Yeah,
budget?
so the free menstrual products have been added to the budget. So in theory, until the budget is passed, it could be removed, but not likely to happen. I had some estimates on what the costing is, and we actually just have, our agenda came out yesterday, and we have a report on this agenda with some of that costing, and it aligns fairly closely with my projections. So it should be, I'm not concerned about that one. It should be a done deal by the end of April. And then the renovations, there's some complications with it because we don't really have detailed blueprints from the original part of the arena. And a urinal is a 2-inch pipe on a wall, and a toilet's a 4-inch pipe on the floor. So the plumbing renovations could get really expensive. And there could be other options. I intentionally wrote the motion a little bit vague, with achieving gender equity in the change rooms as being the goal, as opposed to specifically telling staff removal of a urinal, insertion of a toilet. I've learned to give staff credit where credit's due. I've seen a lot of really creative problem solving, especially in the recreation department, where, you know, we give them, you have to do this, and there is no obvious way to accomplish it. And what they end up coming up with is a really great plan. So I don't like to put them in too tight of a corner, because then the only thing I'm going to get is the best thing that I could think of. I want to give them a goal. This is what I want to achieve, and then leave it wide enough that, you know, all of their area of expertise can help best solve that problem. As long as they're achieving that goal, then how they specifically do it, kind of irrelevant. Like, we have showers, double showers in all of the dressing rooms. So if you look at, you know, if we did up a study of how many people use the dressing rooms, how many of them require a toilet to use the washroom, how many of them shower, we probably have just as many participants who are young enough, they don't shower after hockey, as there are people who need a toilet. So the renovation could end up being where some of the dressing rooms may or may not have showers, right? And then you schedule older teams into certain. So however they come up with that, you know, I've learned not to try to micromanage the details of my projects. I try to intentionally write my motions so that staff have the ability to do the best with them.
And it's also about the language too within the community, right? Like gender equity, it's great that those are things and conversations, and that you had a constituent come to you to say, this has been a problem or on my mind for a while, and creating that avenue to be able to have and create effective change. And then even to go as far as requesting the rest of the region to look into this as well. I mean, it's a complete ripple effect what you've brought forward, and I think it's just great. So we're so proud of you.
Thank you.
So just looking at the time, are you able to leave us with, I thought, the last question for this interview is, what is one piece of brutally honest advice that every woman considering politics needs to hear? I thought that would be a good one just to leave with our students, and maybe we'll have another part 2 interview with you in person or something.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
So I think the best piece of advice, I mean, there's a bit of a list, but the best piece of advice I would say is to know who you are and know your worth. I think as women, we have been, and depending on generationally where you are, right? We all have been told throughout our lives who we are, what spaces are for us, how we are to look, how we are to behave. and, you know, the language around women in leadership roles, right? And so I think the best thing you can do if you're considering stepping forward in politics is work through the unlearning of what you have been told in your life about who you are.
Mhm.
Unlearn that, get pretty clear about who you actually are and what your intentions are and what your skills are, and then you will be ready for this, because there's no doubt, like, I've had it pretty easy. Zorra's been council, staff, residents have been very supportive. I specifically wore a shirt, but I didn't realize how short I was going to be. I wore my Cal Thumpian volunteer t-shirt. You know, I started getting dressed up for this, and then I was like, no. You know, I got into this because I'm a community volunteer. I am someone who cares passionately about community development, public service. This is how I got here. So, you know, my campaigning started years before I even considered running. Really, like, people knew who I was and what I stood for because they saw me out there doing my thing. And they're like, yeah, no, she did this and this for us. She now wants to do this for us. Okay, we have a sense of what that's going to look like. But I have been met with harsh criticism that I did not earn. I've been called things I did not deserve. You know, I've been sent emails in dark corners being told that I'm incompetent, right? And so, because I think we are comfortable with the idea of what a politician is as being, you know, they're liars. They're at one point I Googled what is a politician, and then looked at what those toppers, no, I did a politician is, and then looked at what the autofill options came up, and they're liars. They're, you know, they're patting their own pockets. They're all of these things. So I think if you have a good sense of who you are and why you're getting involved, then when you are no doubt met with that criticism, you're going to be able to rebound from it faster. Right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
unlearning the things that you've been told,
Yeah.
getting a true a good, strong sense of who you are, and making sure that you have some of these conversations with your friends, people who are like-minded, your partner, if you have one, so that it will help you learn that for yourself, but it'll also help build those support networks so that when you are hitting the kneecaps, you know who to go to.
Mhm.
And one last little thing, because I hate the advice of you have to have thick skin to get into politics.
Mhm.
I hate it.
Me too. I
I
think a lot of
Kate
people
and I
don't like
talked about
it.
that 100 times.
yeah,
And I'm just told it so often, and it's like, that is the least helpful advice, you know?
like, and ultimately, telling you to have thick skin says that the abuse is okay.
Yeah.
You're the problem.
Yeah.
You need to not let the abuse in. And it's like, how about calling out the abuse as unacceptable?
Mhm.
And how about, like, we want our politicians to care and pay attention and be connected, but then we want them to not have feelings. And it's like, you know, I'm getting choked up talking about a mom saying, we didn't know we could have change. I'm choked up because that it is so, the passion in me for these little changes, these little victories, the messages that that victory sends when girls go into those washrooms and see those changes and what that tells them about their worth and that their municipality is for them and these facilities are theirs. Like, it is my heart on my sleeve approach to this job that has me emotional about that and motivates me to keep doing it and to do more. Right? So I will always be hurt by hurtful words because my heart will always be on my sleeve. And I will continue to form and reinforce healthy boundaries so that those voices do not overpower the ones that I have in my own head. Right? Because I have to I have to still be able to be happy and healthy in my life in order for me to be able to be positive and show up for my community. So
that's great. Great, great, great. Round of applause from everybody watching. I know it. Well, thank you, Katie. Lindsay, you know, we're always so inspired when we get a chance to chat with you, and we look forward to just building, you know, our local connection, the three of us, and all of those good things. Lindsay, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add before we part ways.
No, I mean, just thank you, because, you know, I think each time someone gets to kind of hear the story of going from, you know, an OCAD art student to a municipal councilor is a good day. Like it's for everybody. Or at least we hope that one day it's for everybody. We're doing our best. And so I hope this inspires women to really put themselves in that headspace that they can say, you know, this, like you said, this is for me, I can do it, and don't let that self-doubt stop you. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure when people watch, they will, you know, inch closer to running, because that's really what we're hoping for. So thank you.
I really hope so. And I think, you know, the more we can do these types of things and connecting with each other, I mean, this was sort of a one-way information stream for people who are watching, but my number is very posted publicly in my email address. So if there's anyone watching, especially if you're fairly local and you're interested and you have more questions, like, those are conversations that I'm always open to having and excited to have. I've just been contacted by someone who said they wanted to meet up and have some coffee and ask some questions. And I'm really excited to look at my calendar and pick a time and be able to have that happen. So I just wanted to thank you both so much for doing this. I had never heard of municipal campaign school. You know, my journey into this is very different, but when I think back to, you know, how I inform myself and where I got my information, I think something like this would have been incredibly helpful. So thank you both so much for providing this. And I think, you know, there's some real benefit to seeing some shift in our representation, and that you're both facilitating this is absolutely supporting that. And congratulations to you both for doing this.
Thank you so much, and we will connect soon. And I think Lindsay and I mentioned that we're hoping in April to have some in-person networkings for Oxford County. So everyone watching in our area will hopefully have another opportunity to meet Katie in person. So thank you so much for sharing, holding space with us, and thanks for everyone watching.